Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, we're going to do a fast and loose tonalist watercolor landscape painting. It's going to be with two pigments. We're going to use burnt umber and raw umber, both from Daniel Smith. I've been slowly exploring the earth tones, just some of those pigments from Daniel Smith, and seeing if I want to use them for my monochromatic or 2 or 3 tone paintings. Now, in front of me, I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. I saturated it with water before I turned on the camera. It is 140 pound cold press, 100% cotton. Now, with this approach, I'm going to go back and forth, wet and wet, and allow a scene to essentially emerge through the application of pigment and the removal of it. I've kind of adopted this technique from the modern tonalist oil painters, Stuart Davies and Dennis Sheehan. Okay, so now that we have all that out the way, I'm just gonna slowly start creating a composition. I don't have anything in mind, but what is coming into mind is TC Steele's Pleasant Run. It's something I did a few sketches of and exploration of on this channel earlier, about 2 months ago, I think. So maybe I'll base something off of that composition. Right now, this is just the burnt umber and just laying it out there. And we'll push it around, we'll let things develop. I think the top of my far horizon line will be here. And I'll use the paper towel to lift where I want my bright highlights. I'm going to essentially remove water from that spot, but I can take the hake brush with my water and go right back into it just like that if I wanted to go back into wet and wet. All right, so let's play around skywise. Once again, this is just the burnt umber. With these paintings, you are more than welcome to follow along. They're a lot of fun. It might be a little difficult to follow along since of how loose it is, but the approach itself is really easily adaptable to any composition, just letting things take place. And of course, you are always welcome to sign anything you do whenever you follow any one of my videos. And you have my express permission to sell anything you do whenever you follow any one of my videos. I'm going to grab some of the raw umber. I haven't used Daniel Smith raw umber yet, so this is my first time. I debated doing a single pigment video on that, a single tube, but I decided against it. I've been doing a lot of portrait work, experimentation this summer in that regard. So I kind of wanted to do less of an experimental video, which it still is, and I just wanted to paint and get some landscape stuff out. I will probably comment on the raw umber, and if you want me to do a video of just the raw umber, I could always go around and do that one day. All right. In my mind, I feel like we have something starting to take place. Pulling that out there. The raw umber does seem to be quite granulating. It almost pushes green for me. I wind up overlapping a lot of layers here. Just kind of getting that folded in look. Let's grab a heavy load. I have so much water being pushed around that I'm trying to increase the intensity, but I'm meeting some resistance. Let's see how this spreads throughout the sky. Just kind of tapping it in. Some of these areas are dry, but I think most of this is wet and wet. I think with techniques like this, the paper itself is the more important thing, especially the 100% cotton. With other paper, that's just paper pulp, would pill up and not be able to handle this. So if you're having difficulty, the first thing to really upgrade is your paper itself. Let's see. You can see everything's still wet in here and it's just moving around. Grabbed a lot more paint. I think I'll use this as kind of like an underpainting. So it seems very, very loose and abstract right now, and then I'll kind of tie things together once I do a dry off. I'm lifting to see if I want any sort of path or water to happen. Let's lift right here. So we'll create this as if we're looking out and down. We have large waterway. And since the scene is so big, it recedes very quickly. So at first I mentioned a painting by TC Steele, kind of just thinking about that horizon line. But now in my mind it's thinking a little bit of Girton's above Bolton. These are all just like paintings that I've done studies of relatively recently, within the past few months. I think I actually want to do a dry off at this point. Any type of lift up, I could potentially make some just vertical, some angled marks, maybe the edge of hills and cliffs, maybe little highlights along the top. I think this will be a big outcropping that's closer to us. We'll just have fun. So since it's so wet still, when I do the dry off, I'm going to hold my blow dryer far away so that I'm not pushing pigment around, and then as it dries, I'll bring it closer and go heavier. So I'm going to pause the camera and you'll be able to see how things lighten up as it dries. All right, so I use the blow dryer. It feels a little cool in some spots, so it's probably still a little damp, but overall, pretty happy with the dry off. A few things I want to point out before we go into this next stage. With the wet and wet, so whenever you dry, you're removing the water so it can get things to lighten up. The tonal shift didn't seem too bad in this case. I noticed a lot of granularity as I was doing the drying. Also, the warm reds of the burnt umber and the almost cool greens of the raw umber. You can see that, and hopefully that's showing through in the video. So a lot of, feels very dynamic. I guess that's a good word to use to describe this. I am going to now play around on top of this, and I think I'm going to change my approach and process. So let me find the right brush. So I'm going to play around with the squirrel mop. This is a smaller one, a size 10 of the Atelier. I think that's from blick.com. The different companies that make the squirrel mops seem to have just different sizing systems. So I'm just going with a smaller squirrel mop. I use this to dot and wash in trees along these areas. So a few things have to be kept in mind. I want these areas to recede and to stay back in the picture plane. But as I'm going over this with the mop and with water within it, it's going to seem like tonally darker, where it's going to want to push forward during that time period. But the goal is that whenever it dries off, it pushes back some. It might be best for me to pause right here, show you that spot, and do a dry off, and we'll see how it lightens up. All right, so that was right there. Looking through the camera whenever I had paused to do that dry off, it didn't jump as forward as it was in person. So hopefully I was able to kind of demonstrate that. So I'm using just my masses that I put in and kind of finding the form that I want for them. I'm going to play around with a variety of strengths, burnt umber and raw umber. And as I put my marks in, I create an area of wet and wet, which then from there, I can then feed and get mixtures in. So I'm letting this whole area right here become kind of a hillside. We get down to the bottom. And what I'm attempting to do is get the side of this hill to move down in this direction with brush strokes. I want this area to be dark right here. So I'll have my next mountain range come in front here, and the next come along here. Kind of just mark it out so you can see what I'm talking about. Now, I do have, whenever I say this is what I'm attempting, this is what I'm trying to do, slight alarm bells go off in my head. And I think it's from Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, where I don't want the viewer to look at the painting and say, oh, this is what the artist was attempting to do. I want the viewer to look at it and say, this is what the artist did, this is what the artist was successfully doing. Whenever I do mountains in this fashion, if I was to wash in completely, I would do a dry off, because whenever I get to this edge, it's going to want to blend into that background one. But I'll just leave a little gap right there. So this is my one that's closer. I'm just playing with the burnt umber right now, and that's going to be warmer. The goal is it's going to push forward in the picture plane. And I'm just going to increase the amount of pigment to really darken things up. Since this is an imaginary scene, what I imagine is light is in the background, the peaks of the mountain, the trees that are reaching up are going to be lighter, and then down below you're going to have that dark in the valley areas. And that's what I was thinking about here, in fact. Now this is 11 by 15, so I refer to it as a quarter sheet. Where if it was matted, it would go inside a frame that would be 16 by 20, the glass part, and the mat would extend there, and the inside would be a little bit shy of 11 by 14. That's just kind of the standard measurement. I just personally found that it worked for me to paint within what's easy to tear the paper into, what's easy to find frames for if something is framed or matted. So at first I had done some works when I had first started in watercolor, let's say 4 years ago, and I had taped it off to different sizes. But then when I had picked up a mat, it was quite restricting. And cutting mats out yourself, it might be something you enjoy doing. I found that it was easy for me to find bulk mats of a standard size for me to work with. So I'm just using this the same brush stroke over and over and trying to break up the monotony of it, have a little bit of different variations. We'll have a tree line here. We'll bring it down over that water. And for these to read it as trees will hopefully give a sense of scale and size to the overall scene. As we're getting closer to the front of the picture plane, I'm going to make them larger, and I think I might even put some scrapes of trunks in here. Grab a little bit of burnt umber at the top of this peak. Almost has a Chinese brush painting feel to it. Also, like I said, if you look at above Girton, some of that is in mind as I'm doing this. And I'll use a card, scrape out some bigger trunks. Okay. Bringing out some more outcroppings. I think it'll be good is to now do a dry off and kind of get an overall feel of everything at once and take a look at the bigger picture. So I'm going to pause the camera. We're going to do a quick dry off. Okay, so I hit it with the blow dryer, and I am very happy with the two color combination with the burnt umber and the raw umber. So this is just a different approach than how I usually use it, but and this is my first time using the color combination from this brand, but I'm very pleased with it. So I did the dry off. I am now going to see how dark we can get things while trying to see what type of just changes we can make to the scene, how we can try to get certain things to pop, and element wise if there's anything I need to play around with. This whole part of the water is going to be in shadow. We're going to have that dark mass right there, cutting in front. What I can do is bring that line up a little bit. To get an S-shaped composition to take place, to sit this edge of water a little higher in the picture plane, but I want it to tonally sit back behind this edge. My mind's going towards massing this in more with less detail to let the more brush detail pop forward some. Tops of trees here. Okay. All right, I think that was a huge improvement right there. Just playing around with those two. All right, so burnt umber, almost straight from the tube here. It's redder and warmer. Goal is to get it to push forward in the picture plane, and just essentially stippling with the squirrel mop, which gives us that half moon shape. In the past, I've tried with squirrel mops and I got that mark and I was like, what could I use that mark for? And it only took me a really long time to realize, wait, I can use that for the tops of trees. What the masters use brush-wise, I'm really not certain. Actually, with regards to brushes, I think there's a lot more discussion about the different brush uses within Chinese brush painting and Japanese and sumi-e brush painting than there is in Western watercolors, at least, you know, like historically, where you would have your more stiffer hair brush and the spring back, the bamboo brush for bamboo leaves, for bamboo stalks, for dry brush effects. And then you would have the goat hair, I think it was goat hair, goat or sheep, which was a lot softer. It was a cloud brush, I think. Or, peony, and you could do flowers and kind of just get a different texture. Then you had your essentially a rigger, which was the whisker brush, I believe. It wasn't made from whiskers, but it was like thin. Actually, that's an interesting comparison between the two while I ramble. The Chinese, Japanese thin brush, I think it's the whisker brush, named that for painting whiskers, not because it was whiskers. The bamboo brush being painting for bamboo. And then in Western watercolor you have your rigger brush, which was named that because it was used to paint riggers on sails, on boats. So it's interesting that in Western and I guess Oriental, I don't know if you'd say Eastern, some of the names or the nicknames for the brushes were named after what they were for. I guess the filbert was used to paint someone named Filbert. That was a really lame excuse of a joke. Anyway, I'm really happy with this combination. We used the paper towel, we used wet and wet in the hake brush, and just kind of got our masses in. Then from there we took a different approach than usual, and to get a large scene with rolling hills or mountains, we used the squirrel mop to pick out just ridges and movement along that. And it was quite fun. So I enjoyed that. A brush like this is probably about $15. I know they sell some really expensive one, like $60, but I can't bring myself to spend that much on a brush. And if you like these videos and you feel that I'm missing anything, let me know down below. If you have any questions or comments, once again, let me know down below. Like I said, you're always welcome to follow along with any one of these videos. You're always more than welcome to sign your own name to it. I want you guys to be successful, to have fun, and to have money for art supplies. If you don't have, in this case I bought these Daniel Smith tubes to try out, and I'm really happy with the granulation and how they look as a two-color painting. But if you don't have Daniel Smith, that's totally fine. Usually I use Cotman or Van Gogh brand or Da Vinci brand. And if you're just starting out, the cheaper brands like that, White Knights is another one, I think that's in Europe, it'll be cheaper, so you'll be less stingy and feeling restricted to using pigment you might be kind of concerned about using it all up. And the best way to learn is to just to paint, paint, paint. If you're just starting out, the most expensive thing I would spend money on if I were you would be cotton paper. This is the Stonehenge Aqua. I buy a sheet of it for a little bit over $4, and I tear it into quarters. So each painting is costing me about $1.25, but it's really not. It's worth it. I spent 30 minutes doing this. It was worth spending $1.25 for 30 minutes of painting. And you can always use the back of them. In fact, a lot of people say that painting on the back helps you loosen up, because you're already working on something you already worked on. You feel like it's like, okay, just practice. So that's a technique that you can use just to help loosen up more. If you want to support this channel, I have a whole bunch of links down below. And thank you so much to all you guys that subscribe and donate to this channel. All the money I try to put back into art supplies and exploring different things. And at this point, I have a lot of videos that I need to release. And I want to say I have 670 videos up at least. And I probably have 50 more that need to be released. So I paint a lot, or I do a lot of art videos. All right, I think I got a little too caught up in darkening this up. I want that to stick forward a little bit. I'll bring out some trees over that. Take the edge of a card and scrape some trunks there to let that set forward and push that other area back. We'll do a last dry off, we'll sign, and then we'll call it. All right, so I did the dry off. I think we should throw a little bit of birds in the sky. This is just a #1 rigger. I just like the simple swoosh shapes. You get a lot of movement going on. And if you wanted to bring them over down here and have them rise up, you could play around. If you wanted to put a little boat down in this area, you could. In fact, let's actually do that. Let's mark a boat. But what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to grab some water. And I'm going to wet this spot right here and see if I can pull that pigment up, so we see if it can lift. I first saw this demonstrated in a video by Stephen Cronin, where he'd wet the area and try to lift. And he actually used it for the same purpose, to pull out the white of a sail for a boat. Some pigments will have a staining aspect. I believe that neither of these are staining in any shape or form. So we should be able to get back to some semblance of the white of the paper. You can use, and I have used, the magic eraser in the past. Magic eraser is the melanin foam. This is the weird sponge at the store that's used to kind of clean appliances. And all it is an abrasive material that essentially just sandpapering the paper. There's no chemicals in it. I don't think you're supposed to use magic eraser on your food utensils or anything like that, though, because of that little particles. You could usually pick them up at the dollar store or online in bulk, or if you buy it under the Magic Eraser name, it's usually more expensive, but here's what it is. Let me see. You could also take something like a jelly roll and put that white in. You could also put gouache in. Another favorite is the bleed proof white. So we saw that it lifted up some. I just feel like it gives the flow. I really don't want to use white itself in this painting. Put that masked. And we'll put the reflection of that down here. I'm going to sign here. Well, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great evening.